I suppose, like many members of the Church of Ireland, I have a certain instinctive fear of the future. We often tend in our tradition to regard the past as where everything was great. You know, the myth that the churches were full and teeming with young people and you had to come early to get a seat, and that there were glory days rather like the biblical flesh pots of Egypt, which are dreamlike and gone. I remember my theological college principal, I must have been something of a young fogey at the time, rather riling and saying, that Michael Burrows, he clings to the past. But perhaps as I grow older, my enthusiasm for the past, notwithstanding having spent some of my best formative years studying medieval history, my enthusiasm for the past is more textured. And perhaps in that context, I have tried to become less afraid of the future, regarding it as already God's, there to be embraced, and the stewardship of it will largely pass to generations after me and to my own children. And yet at the moment, I think one has a legitimate reason to be disproportionately afraid of the future on what one might call the wider international scene. Not only have we great uncertainty in our own leadership of government at the moment, but consider Israel, Gaza, the Ukraine, coming elections in America, the recent sham election in Russia, nuclear bravado, the issue of Taiwan, the sense that even some of the worst conflicts in the world are being construed as holy wars at the moment. Think of the Russian Orthodox Patriarch of Moscow, who seems to regard regaining Ukraine as a kind of holy war, as he would see it. And in many ways, it's a frightening time to be around. I'm old enough to have lived during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm not old enough to remember it, though my wife teased me recently by saying, I suppose you remember thinking you heard the missiles go overhead when you were lying in your cot. I don't quite remember that, but certainly the world owes a lot to the wisdom and the calm of people like Jack Kennedy, who were around at the time. We live in a world that is delicate, that is full of suffering, where the future looks bleak at times and where the nuclear clock is ticking worryingly. Having said all that, I approach Easter with a new confidence, hope and joy. Because I say to myself, as I face an uncertain future and even try to embrace it, that it is already God's. And one of the main key lessons of the resurrection story is that Jesus, the risen living one, wherever we go, into whatever situations we face, is always ahead of us. We've got to pursue him into the future to find him, and he will be there, having already trodden the roughest of paths in the most unlikely situations and people. In the earliest surviving account of the resurrection, the original text of Mark, without any of the later accretions, the risen Jesus is never seen. The witnesses, the women, frightened as they are of what is ahead at the tomb, they are assured of the truth that he is risen, that he has gone ahead into Galilee. There they will see him, and there the gospel ends. With fear, certainly, but with a sense that Jesus already owns the future. Head into it courageously, because that's where you're going to find him. And for me, that is the living, hopeful, enduring truth of Easter. The ancient Greeks, in whose cultural world the New Testament was written, were afraid of the future. They always regarded it as coming up behind them, like threatening waves almost about to engulf them. They didn't face into the future, they regarded it as a threatening presence at their backs. And so it is echoing the thinking of that world. The Belfast poet Michael Longley could say, introducing a poem he wrote much more recently, I am walking backwards into the future like a Greek. I am walking backwards into the future like a Greek. Jesus, however, reverses the cultural assumptions of his time and since. We don't walk backwards into the future terrified of it. We look at it head on, despite all its threats, despite the clouds. We say, let's walk ahead because that future is God's. And Jesus is always living and eternally present ahead of us, waiting for us around the next corner. Let's head forward with confidence because we need to pursue him. Enjoy the pursuit, seek the truth. Happy Easter. Alleluia.